The meeting was supposed to run until 4. Linda left at 2:30. She couldn't explain why.
I can't reach them. The
Just a
signal's
feeling,
gone.
small and formless, sitting at the back of her
Why
throat
isn't
the
it
whole drive
working?
back.
We need to get out of
She
here.
called the nanny. Nothing. Called again. Still nothing. She told herself it was fine.
Help!
She was very good at telling
Somebody
herself
help
things
me.
were fine.
Please.
The door to apartment 18F was not locked. Not even closed. Just resting against the frame, 1 inch of dark where there should have been nothing. Something in her chest turned over before she even touched it. She pushed it open. John? Silence.
I want these changes
Bedroom
implemented
day,
by
not
end of
tea.
day. Any delays will not be
Bedroom
acceptable.
D. Empty
you understand?
disjoint 4.
I
Bathroom
require this completed by end of day.
Empty.
There is no room for
Balcony
error.
tie inside. Empty tie. She pulled up the hallway camera with hands that weren't quite steady, and there he was. 3 years old. Barefoot. Walking toward the elevator alone, 3 minutes ago, like he had somewhere important to be. She knew 2 things in the same breath. Her son was alone somewhere in this building. And John, a child who once spent an entire birthday party pressed against a wall rather than walk through a room of people he didn't know, was alone and frightened, with no one he trusted beside him. She hit the elevator button, watched it sitting 4 floors above her, rising. Took the stairs instead. 18 floors. Her heel snapped off on the 9th. She didn't feel it. She hit the ground floor door with her shoulder and burst into the garden. And stopped. Oh, running. And I'm stopped. John was sitting on the grass. Calm. Still. A man she had never spoken to sat nearby, not touching him, not reaching, just talking quietly, like they had all the time in the world. The relief lasted exactly 3 seconds. Because then John reached over, slowly, deliberately, and placed his hand on top of the stranger's. This child who flinched from new faces. This child who needed weeks before he let anyone close. Reaching out. To someone he had known for minutes. Then he heard her footsteps. Turned. Saw her. And leaned away. Linda stood there, one shoe, chest still heaving, and felt something collapse quietly inside her. Not the fear of losing him in a building. Something slower. Something that had probably been true for a long time before today forced her to see it. Her son felt safer with a stranger than with her. How long had that been true? And how had she never noticed? 48 hours before the garden, Linda Cho had been on the 23rd floor of the Meridian Tower, signing her name. The pen moved the way it always did. Clean, decisive, no hesitation. 3rd acquisition of the year. The room smelled like coffee and fresh printer ink and the particular silence of people who were paid to agree with her. Her assistant Marcus leaned in from the left. He always leaned in from the left, always at that specific angle, like a man who had learned that standing directly beside her felt presumptuous. "John hasn't eaten dinner," he said quietly. "The nanny called. She wanted to know if you're coming home." Linda didn't look up from the contract. "Transfer 5,000 to her card," she said. "Tell her to order something good, whatever he likes." Marcus wrote it down. He didn't say anything else. Linda signed the last page and slid the folder across the table. Someone started clapping. She accepted it the way she accepted most things, briefly, then moved on. She didn't think about John again until the elevator. And even then, only for a moment. This was not a new pattern. It had been running for most of John's 3 years. The transferred money, the ordered food, the nanny who stayed late because Linda's phone kept going to voicemail. Linda had built a company worth $300 million on the belief that every problem had a correct solution, and that the correct solution usually involved resources, not time. She was not a cold person. She told herself this often. She was a person with a great many things to hold. John had dark eyes that tracked everything. The way a person's hands moved, the shift in a voice, the half second before someone turned away. He noticed things most adults didn't know they were doing. He had learned, somewhere in the soft architecture of his first years, that calling out didn't always bring someone back. He'd tried. He remembered the particular quality of silence that followed his voice, not hostile, just empty. And so he had stopped expecting. Not because he was broken, because he was 3 and 3-year-olds adapt to whatever world they're handed. When he was frightened, he went still. When he was lonely, he folded inward. He was a small person who had learned to take up very little space. 2 floors below the lobby, in the building's maintenance corridor, David Rains had worked at Harlow Residences for 4 years. He was not remarkable in any obvious way. Medium height, calloused hands, the kind of face people forgot in hallways but remembered in conversations. He fixed things. Electrical panels, water pressure, the elevator that stuck on the 7th floor every second Tuesday. He also had a daughter named Anna, 5 years old. Red sneakers, the kind of laugh that made strangers smile on the street. Anna's mother had left when Anna was 2.5. Not dramatically, no shouting, no door slamming. Just a Tuesday morning when she said she needed something different, and by Thursday, her side of the closet was empty. What followed was 8 months David did not talk about often. Anna had stopped eating lunch, started waking at 2 in the morning, standing in the doorway of his room, not saying anything. She didn't cry either. She just stood there, waiting for something he didn't know how to give. He'd read everything he could find. Attachment theory, sensory processing. A child psychologist named Dr. Elaine Marsh had a podcast he listened to on his lunch breaks in the maintenance corridor. The core of it, stripped of all the clinical language, was this: don't chase. Don't grab. Sit near the edge and wait. Let them come to you. It had taken 8 months, but Anna had come back. He had learned through that particular pain exactly what it looked like when a small person needed safety more than they needed closeness. He had learned to tell the difference. This is why when Anna ran into the corridor that afternoon and grabbed his sleeve, Dad, there's a little boy. He's alone. He looks, she searched for the word, lost. David didn't rush. He walked. The ground floor garden at Harlow Residences was a narrow strip of grass between the lobby glass and the parking structure wall. Not beautiful. A few benches. A magnolia tree that bloomed every March and was ignored the rest of the year. This is where John had ended up. He was sitting near the magnolia, knees pulled up, watching a pigeon that didn't know it was being watched. He wasn't crying. He wasn't calling for anyone. He had woken from his nap to an empty apartment, said hello once into the hallway, heard nothing, and followed the light from the open door the way small things follow warmth. David came around the corner, saw him, and sat down on the ground, not on the bench, the ground, about 5 feet away, back against the wall, like a man who had simply decided to rest. "I'm waiting for my daughter," David said. Not to John specifically, just into the air between them. "She went to get her backpack. She takes a long time with her backpack." John looked at him. David looked at the pigeon. 30 seconds passed. John shifted. Moved 6 inches closer. Stopped. David didn't react. Another 30 seconds. John moved again. Then again. Until he was close enough that David could see the sleep crease still pressed into his cheek. John reached over and placed his hand on top of David's. David let it stay. Didn't squeeze. Didn't turn. Just let the weight of it sit. Anna came back with her backpack and sat on David's other side, pulling out a picture book without a word. She had learned, from years of watching her father, how to be quiet near someone who needed quiet. The three of them sat like that, a man, his daughter, and a boy who belonged to someone else, in a garden that no one had ever called beautiful. Then the door hit the wall. Linda came through it with her shoulder, one shoe on, hair pulled loose. She was already saying his name before she saw him. John. He looked up. Something moved across his face, not relief. Something that looked, to anyone watching closely, like bracing. Linda crossed the grass in 4 steps and reached down to pick him up. Shoe. John made a sound she had never heard from him before. Not a word. A recoil. He pushed both hands against her and twisted away, scrambling back toward David's side, pressing himself against the man's arm. Linda straightened. Her hands were still in the shape of lifting him. She reached again. John, come on, it's okay, it's Mama. He cried. Loudly, fully. The kind of crying he almost never did. Chest heaving, face turned into David's sleeve. The sound went through her like something physical. The more you push, the further he goes, David said. Not unkindly. Just factually, the way someone reports weather. Linda looked at him. A maintenance worker she had passed in the lobby a dozen times without seeing. Sitting on the ground in her building's garden with her son pressed against his arm, telling her how to handle her own child. She wanted to say something sharp. The words were right there. But John was still crying. His face was still turned away from her. And Linda, who had an answer for everything, who had built a company on never being without an answer, stood there. Both hands empty. Nothing to sign. Nothing to transfer. Nothing to fix. Just the sound of her son crying. Not because he was lost, not because he was hurt. Because she had tried to hold him. She didn't understand it yet. But something behind her sternum registered it before her mind could argue. Something was wrong. Not with John. With the distance between them. And she had helped build it, inch by inch, without ever knowing she was doing it. 1 week after the garden. Linda did what she always did when something wasn't working. She hired better. Within 72 hours, she had terminated the previous nanny's contract, transferred 2 months' salary, posted a new listing, had someone credentialed by Saturday. She had also fired off 3 emails and 2 calls to her building manager about the unlocked stairwell door, the inadequate camera coverage on floor 18, and the protocol for unaccompanied minors in common areas. She had assigned blame efficiently and moved on. It was cleaner that way. She also hired Dr. Patricia Weil. Dr. Weil had a waiting list. Linda didn't use waiting lists. She called the office directly, mentioned the hospital board she sat on, and had an appointment by Monday. She had John's room redone over a single weekend. Harsh overhead light replaced with warm-toned panels. Hard plastic toys swapped for the sensory items Dr. Weil had recommended. Weighted blanket, D-I-T-R. Soft textures. A sound machine that cost $400 and played Rain. She stood in the doorway of the finished room on Sunday night and looked at it. It was perfect. Calm, neat, considered. John walked in, looked at it for 3 seconds, and went to sit in the corner by the window, the one spot that hadn't changed. 3 sessions. That was all Dr. Weil needed. She observed John on Tuesday, Thursday, the following Tuesday. Small leather notebook. Mostly silent. She watched the way he moved through the apartment, the way he oriented himself relative to Linda, the particular distance he kept, always just out of arm's reach, always with his back to a wall. On the Wednesday, after the third session, she asked Linda to come in alone. The office was in the Fenwick building on 34th, 12th floor Tower. The kind of room designed to feel neutral. Gray sofa, white shelves, a single plant that Linda decided was artificial. She sat with her hands on her knees and her posture straight, the way she sat in negotiations. John's development is within normal range, Dr. Weil said. Cognitively, linguistically, motor skills, all within range for his age. Linda felt something loosen in her chest. However, Dr. Weiss set down her pen knee. What I'm observing isn't a developmental issue. John is responding to his emotional environment, specifically to his primary caregiver. The room was very quiet. You're saying I'm the problem, Linda said. I'm saying there's no problem. Dr. Weil's voice didn't waver. There's a child who has learned that reaching out doesn't always bring someone back, and there's a caregiver who is present physically, but not always in the way he needs. John doesn't need a better room. He needs real presence, not a perfect arrangement of it. Linda looked at the artificial plant. I'm doing everything I can, she said. The words came out flatter than she intended. I left a meeting early. I hired you. I redid his entire room in 48 hours. What exactly does real presence mean? Dr. Weil looked at her with the patience of someone who had heard this question many times, from many different people who loved their children and had no idea what they were doing. She didn't answer immediately, and the silence was somehow worse than anything she could have said. Linda drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. She was not sad. She was not guilty. She was angry at the vagueness of it, at the impossibility of fixing something no one could define, at the particular humiliation of being told she was the variable in her own child's equation. She was doing everything right. She just needed more time. 11 days after Dr. Weil's office. The 18th floor's electrical panel had been flagging a fault reading for a week. Linda heard the knock at 2:10 and opened the door to find David Rains holding a toolbox and a 5-year-old. The 5-year-old had a backpack shaped like a turtle and was looking up at Linda with the uncomplicated directness of someone who had not yet learned to find adults intimidating. School's on a half day, David said. The panel job should take about 40 minutes. Anna's quiet. Anna, who was currently examining the door frame with apparent scientific interest, did not confirm or deny this. Linda should have said no. She had a call at 3. She had a son in the back bedroom who had not spoken a full sentence to her in nearly 2 weeks. Fine, she said. 40 minutes. David went to find the panel. Anna walked in, slipped off her shoes without being asked, and sat down on the living room floor. She pulled a picture book from her turtle backpack, Animals of the Deep, worn at the spine, and opened it in her lap. She did not look around. She did not try to find John. She just read. John appeared in the hallway 11 minutes later. Linda, watching from the kitchen doorway, saw him stop at the edge of the living room. He stood very still, the way he always stood when he was deciding something. Anna turned a page. John took 3 steps into the room, stopped, sat down, not next to her, a careful distance away, outside the reach of accidental contact. He looked at the page she was on. Anna glanced sideways, not at him, at the book. This one, she said, pointing at an illustration. Do you know what this is? A long pause. John nodded. It was small, barely visible, but it was there, a deliberate response aimed outward at another person. The first one, Linda had seen in almost 2 weeks. Anna turned the book slightly so he could see it better. I didn't know what it was the first time. My dad told me. It has 3 hearts. John looked at the picture. His lips moved. Then, barely above a whisper, octopus, 3 hearts. Anna nodded seriously as if this confirmed something important. Yeah, she said, and turned the page. Linda stood in the doorway and did not move. Something was happening that she was afraid to interrupt. The way you don't look directly at something fragile in case the looking breaks it. Her son had just spoken. Not to a specialist. Not to her. To a 5-year-old who hadn't tried to do anything at all. David appeared beside her, toolbox in hand, job done. He glanced into the living room, saw the 2 children on the floor, John now close enough that their shoulders were almost touching. He looked at Linda's face. She's not helping him, he said quietly. She's just there. Linda didn't answer. She was watching John turn the page himself, reaching across carefully, moving it, and something hollow in her chest registered the smallness of the gesture and how much it cost her that she hadn't been the one to earn it. The following Saturday. No meetings scheduled. Linda had blocked the entire morning, the first time in 8 months she had blocked time with no deliverable attached. She had read 4 articles and 1 academic paper on emotionally available parenting. She had watched a 40-minute video by a child development specialist in Copenhagen. She had written in her planner, just be present, no agenda. She had underlined it. She sat down on the living room floor at 9:15. John was arranging wooden animals near the window, his private logic intact. Linda sat 3 feet away, phone face down, hands in her lap, face relaxed the way the Copenhagen specialist had demonstrated. She was doing everything correctly. John played for 4 minutes. Then he stood up, picked up 2 wooden animals, and walked to the back bedroom. He pulled the door almost closed behind him. Not all the way. Just enough. David was in the hallway outside 18F, replacing a light fixture, when Linda opened the door. Across the hall, through the open maintenance cupboard, Anna sat on an upturned crate reading the ocean book. Linda stood in the doorframe. I did what you do, she said. Her voice was controlled. Mostly. I sat near him. I didn't push. I didn't talk. I put my phone down. I did exactly what I watched you do. She stopped. He left the room. David set down his screwdriver. You were doing what I do, he said. That's different from doing what I do. That doesn't make sense. You were sitting next to him, but you were waiting for something to happen. You were watching for results. He felt it. Linda's jaw tightened. So what am I supposed to do? I've hired the best specialist in the city. I've blocked my mornings. I am trying. I know you are. Then what? You're not with him, David said. You're trying to get something from him. The hallway was quiet. Linda looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Anna on her crate, turning a page without waiting for anyone to tell her she was doing it right. So what do I do? She asked. This time it was different. Not the sharp, defended version from Dr. Wiles' office. Not the bargaining version. This was quieter. He. Nalartorian. Or I'd say. The question of someone who had genuinely run out of answers. David was quiet for a moment. I don't know, but I think it starts with stopping. The word stopping sat in Linda's chest like something she didn't have a category for yet. But she didn't argue. And for Linda Cho, that was new. 6 weeks after the garden. The board had been asking for the same 6. The Meridian Group's product launch had been on the calendar since February. The building management system Linda had greenlit 2 years ago when everyone in the room thought she was wrong. 300 guests. Outdoor venue at Kellner Plaza. Press from 4 publications. The kind of event where the CEO's absence would not be a scheduling issue. It would be a story. Linda had tried to send a proxy. The board had been polite about it and firm. 2 hours, they said. Just the opening and the signing. She stood in John's doorway that morning and watched him arrange his wooden animals on the windowsill. "You're coming with me today," she said. "There'll be a quiet area behind the stage. Sophie will be with you the whole time." John didn't look up. She had called ahead about the noise levels. Confirmed the backstage area was separated from the main speakers. Arranged a car with tinted windows. She had thought of everything. She told herself this on the drive over. David had gotten the call about Kellner Plaza on Wednesday. The venue needed someone to run the auxiliary soundboard for 2 hours, straightforward work. He'd taken it because Anna had a new book she wanted and books weren't free. He mentioned it that evening in the hallway when he passed Linda at the mailboxes. "Kellner Plaza, Job Saturday," he said. "Sounds like a big event." "It's mine," she said. Then, before she could stop herself, "John's coming. I couldn't find a way around it." David nodded. He didn't say anything else, but he filed it away. Anna sat beside him in the service van on Saturday with her turtle backpack, already reading. David found the sound booth, got Anna settled with her book and a juice box, and started running pre-show checks. The opening remarks were scheduled for 2 o'clock. At 1:58, someone in production added 15 seconds of mini pyrotechnics to the run sheet. Ground level. Festive. The kind of thing that looked great on video. The first pop hit without warning. Linda was at the edge of the stage when she heard it. Sharp, percussive, louder than expected because the sound system was running at 80% instead of 60, and her body was already turning before the second one fired. She saw John through the gap in the stage curtain. Both hands over his ears, knees folding, down to the ground in one slow collapse, like something had cut the wire holding him up. His mouth was open but no sound came out. Eyes closed. Whole body pulled inward, elbows to knees, making himself as small as possible. Sophie crouched down, reached for him. John twisted away, hard enough that Sophie stumbled back. Linda was moving. Around the edge of the stage, through the curtain gap, into the backstage corridor. She reached him in 4 steps and put her hands out to lift him. His eyes opened. He looked at her hands, coming toward him, reaching, and his whole body tightened. The preemptive brace of a child who knew what came next and was already defending against it. Her hands stopped in the air, 6 inches from him. The applause was still going. Someone at the podium was saying her name. Marcus would be looking for her. 300 people and 4 journalists were on the other side of that curtain. John's eyes moved past her. She followed his gaze. David was standing at the far end of the corridor, near the equipment cases, Anna beside him. He had come to check a cable junction when he heard the pyrotechnics and had stopped when he saw them. John looked at David, then back at Linda. His hands still over his ears, chest still heaving, eyes moving between them with the exhausted calculation of a small person trying to find the direction that was safe. Linda watched her son look at David the way he had never looked at her. And something in her did not break. It did something quieter than breaking. It released, like a breath held for 3 years without knowing it. She lowered her hands. not to her sides. She opened them, palms up, and sat down. On the concrete floor of the backstage corridor, in a venue with 300 guests and a podium waiting for her name. She sat down and did not reach. Did not speak. Did not make her face perform anything. She just opened her hands and stayed there. David saw what she was doing. He stayed exactly where he was, Anna's shoulder under his hand, and he waited. The crowd noise faded. The corridor went quiet. John looked at his mother on the ground, at her open hands, at the fact that she was not coming toward him. His breathing slowed. Not much. A little. He looked at David one more time. David looked back at him. Then, very slightly, tilted his head toward Linda. Not a command. Just an acknowledgement. She's there. John looked at his mother's open hands. He stood up. It took him a long time. He stood and didn't move for several seconds, just breathed, and Linda kept her hands open and did not let the wanting show on her face, even though it was the hardest thing she had ever done in a room. He walked toward her, each step deliberate, still deciding. He didn't climb into her arms. He sat down beside her on the concrete floor, close enough that his shoulder pressed against hers, tucked his knees up and looked at the wall across from them. Linda felt the weight of him against her side. She didn't move. Didn't squeeze. Didn't say, "See, it's okay, I told you." She just stayed. Behind them, David took Anna's hand and stepped back further into the corridor, giving them the only thing they needed, which was the illusion of being alone. Linda's phone buzzed in her pocket. Marcus. The podium. The board. 300 people. She did not reach for it. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Linda Cho had something more important in her hands than a solution. She had her son. And she was, finally, just holding still. That evening, the park 2 blocks from Harlow residences. Linda had driven past it 100 times without stopping. She stopped now. John walked ahead of her through the gate and found a patch of grass near the fence. He sat down and began pulling small pieces of grass from the ground one by one, examining each briefly and setting it aside. Linda sat on the nearest bench, not next to him, close enough to see his face. She left her phone in the bag. The afternoon was cool. Wait. A dog passed on the other side of the fence. John watched it go. After a few minutes, he looked up, not at the dog, at her. A brief checking glance, the kind you give a lamp to confirm it's still on. She was there. He looked back down. 5 minutes later, he looked again. Same glance. Same duration. She was still there. The rhythm of it, the looking, the confirming, the returning to his own small world, pressed against her throat in a way she hadn't expected. He was checking. He had learned somewhere in 3 years to check whether she'd stay. And he was still learning whether the answer could be yes. She stayed until the light changed. John fell asleep before 8 tried. Linda sat on the edge of his bed afterward, in the warm-toned light, and looked at him. He slept with one fist near his mouth. He had done this since the hospital. She had taken a photograph of it then. She didn't know where that photograph was now. She thought about one question she hadn't been able to answer that afternoon in the park. OMG. 3 words. What is his favorite color? She didn't know. She had bought him everything. Every color of everything. And she did not know which one he reached for first in the morning. which one he lined up at the front of the shelf, which one he held longer than the others. 36 months. She had been present for a fraction of them in any way that counted, and she had told herself the fraction was enough because it was high quality, optimized, intentional. Something moved up through her and reached her eyes before she could redirect it. She sat on the edge of her son's bed and cried in the specific way of someone who is not sad about what happened today, but about the long accumulation of days before it. All the dinners transferred instead of attended, all the calls she'd let go to voicemail, all the time she had solved the problem of her absence with money and told herself that was the same thing. It wasn't the same thing. She had always known this. She had just been too busy being right about everything else to stop and know it here. She turned off the light and sat in the dark for a while longer, not doing anything, just being in the room where he was. David knocked the following evening. She opened the door to find him holding John's small gray jacket, abandoned in the corridor the day before. "He left this," David said. "Thank you." She took it, started to close the door. Then, she stopped, started again. "How much do I owe you? For yesterday? For being there?" David looked at her steadily. "Nothing. I'd like to..." "Inda." He said her name simply. "Nothing." She looked down at the jacket in her hands. $38 to Archie. She remembered buying it. She had not remembered buying it until this moment. "How did you do it?" she said, when Anna pulled away. He shifted the toolbox to his other hand. He was quiet for a moment, like a man deciding whether a door should open. "I chased her," he said, "for a long time. Every time she went quiet, I got louder. Every time she moved away, I got closer. I thought presence meant proximity. I thought if I was just there enough, she'd come back. Did it work? It made it worse. The more I pushed, the smaller she got. She started sleeping with her back to the door." He paused. 8 months after her mother left, Anna stopped calling me Dad for a while. Just stopped. Called me David. I didn't correct her. I was so afraid of getting it wrong I could barely speak to her some days. Linda looked at him. "What changed?" "I stopped trying to fix it." He said it like it still cost him something. "I stopped going in with a plan. I just sat in the same room, ate my breakfast. Let her see me not needing anything from her." "How long?" 8 months, start to finish. He met her eyes. "Longest 8 months of my life." Linda was quiet. Outside, someone's door closed 2 floors down. "I don't know if I'm patient enough," she said. The words came out unguarded, which was not something she was used to. "I don't know if I can sit in a room and not need anything. That's not..." She stopped. "That's not how I'm built." "You sat on a concrete floor in front of 300 people yesterday," David said, "and you didn't move." She didn't answer. "You're more patient than you think," he said. "You just haven't had a reason to use it before." Neither of them said anything for a moment. It was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind that arrives after something true has been said, and both people need a second to let it settle. "You haven't told anyone that before," Linda said. "About the 8 months, Anna not calling you Dad." He considered this. "No," he said. "I haven't." "Good night," she said. "Good night," he said. She closed the door and stood in the entryway holding a $38 jacket, aware that something had shifted in the last 10 minutes that she didn't have language for yet. Not a solution. Not a plan. Just a door left open a crack by someone who hadn't needed anything from her in return. Anna came on Thursday, and the Friday after. Then the following Tuesday, with birds of every continent and a small bag of wooden puzzle pieces she'd decided to share without being asked. Linda noticed something on Anna's third visit. The way the girl sometimes glanced at John when he wasn't looking, quick and assessing. The way a small person checks whether another small person is okay. Anna never said anything about it. She never changed her behavior based on what she saw. She just checked quietly and went back to her book. She was 5 years old, and she already knew how to love someone without making them feel it. The rhythm between the two children had no architecture to it. No curriculum, no schedule. Anna arrived, sat on the floor, opened whatever she'd brought. John appeared at varying intervals, sometimes quickly, sometimes after long invisible consideration, and inserted himself into her orbit at whatever distance felt right. Linda stopped watching from the doorway. She started sitting in the living room when Anna came, not next to John, not between them. Just nearby. Not needing anything. Not waiting for a result. It took 9 days. John was working on a corner piece of Anna's puzzle, his tongue pressed to his teeth in concentration. He got it. Held it up. Looked across the room. "Mama," he said. "Look." 2 words. Aimed at her. Wanting her to see. Linda looked. "That's the hard one," she said. "That's the one that goes first." He looked at it in his hand. Then at her. Something in his face shifted. Small, barely legible. The beginning of something that might become, in time, ordinary. He turned back to the puzzle. But he had turned toward her first. Not to be held. Not because he needed something fixed. Just to show her a corner piece he was proud of. It was not a breakthrough. It was a door, barely open, a single inch of light. Linda kept her hands in her lap and let it be exactly what it was. It was Anna's idea to go to the park. She arrived on Saturday morning and announced it before she had fully removed her shoes. "There's a fountain 2 streets over," she told John. "We should go." John looked at her. Then at Linda. Linda looked at David, who was in the doorway with the expression of a man who had long stopped being surprised by his daughter's logistics. "She's been planning this since Wednesday," he said. They went. The 2 children ran ahead through the gate, not because anyone told them to, just because they were 5 and 3, and there was open space and a fountain Anna had been thinking about for 4 days. John ran slightly behind her, shorter legs working harder, his face doing something that was not quite a smile but was close. Linda and David walked through the gate behind them. No plan. No plan. Dunch. No scheduled duration. Linda had left her phone in the car, not forgotten, left. On purpose. Face down on the passenger seat, like something she was practicing being without. They walked side by side without talking. It was not an awkward silence. It was the kind that belongs to people who have already said the important things and don't need to fill the space around them. Ahead, Anna reached the fountain and began explaining something to John with full-body emphasis. Hands moving, pointing at the water, pointing at the sky, the complete physical commitment of a 5-year-old with an audience and a theory. John watched her hands. Then he tripped. A shallow root, barely raised above the path. His right knee hit the ground and he pitched forward, palms catching him. He stayed down for a second. Linda's body moved first. 1 step forward, weight already shifting. She stopped herself. John was already pushing up, both hands flat on the path, knee coming under him, the small deliberate sequence of getting back up on his own. He stood, brushed one palm against his jacket. Then he looked back at her. Not crying, not asking, just checking. She nodded. Once. Slow. He turned and ran to catch up with Anna. Linda stood on the path and felt the single step she hadn't taken settle into place like something completing. 3 months ago, she would have been beside him before he hit the ground. She would have lifted him and checked his palms and asked twice if he was okay in a voice pitched too high, and he would have gone rigid in her arms. He had just looked at her for confirmation. She had given it without touching him. That was all he needed. That was always all he needed. She started walking again. Anna had determined the correct game involved throwing leaves into the fountain and watching them circle. John crouched at the basin's edge, selecting leaves with the same careful logic he applied to his wooden animals, some criterion entirely his own. David and Linda ended up on the bench nearest the fountain, still not talking much, just watching. Anna found a leaf she found unacceptable and threw it on the ground. John picked it up and put it in the water anyway. Anna looked at him. He looked at the water. She appeared to decide this was acceptable and moved on. After a while, John stood up from the basin and crossed the path to the bench. He took Linda's hand. Not to be picked up. Not because he needed something fixed. He just put his hand in hers and stood beside her, watching Anna attempt to refine her throwing technique, his small weight leaning very slightly against her knee. Linda closed her hand around his. Gently. No grip. Just there. David watched Anna demonstrate the technique to an increasingly specific standard and said quietly, without looking at Linda, "You okay? You okay?" Linda watched John shift his weight, eyes on his friend, something warm and unhurried moving across his face. "Yeah," she said. There is a longer answer. Something about concrete floors and gray jackets, and learning the difference between a room and a presence, about a child who needed her to stop reaching before he could reach back. But David had been there for most of it. He already knew. "First time in a while," she said instead. He nodded. Across the path, Anna had recruited John into the throwing technique. He was receiving instruction with great seriousness, holding a leaf at the precise angle specified, waiting for her signal. She gave it. He threw. The leaf hit the water and circled. Anna made a sound of pure vindication. John watched the leaf go around, and his face did the thing it had been doing more often lately, opening just slightly, like a window someone remembered to unstick after a long winter. Linda did not reach for her phone. She did not take a photograph. She just watched. She had spent 3 years believing that being a good mother meant never getting it wrong. The right room, the right specialist, the right food, the right schedule. Every variable controlled. Every problem resourced. Every absence covered by something that cost enough to feel like it counted. What no spreadsheet and no consultant and no $400 sound machine could have told her was that her son didn't need her to be correct. He needed her to be there. Still. Open-handed. Not waiting for a result. Just there. That was the whole of it. That was enough. There is a kind of love that looks like effort. Schedules kept. Bills paid. The right school. The right food. The right room with the right light. Everything arranged. Everything covered. Everything, except the one thing that cannot be arranged. Presence. Real presence. The kind that asks nothing in return. The kind that sits on a concrete floor in front of 300 people and opens its hands and waits. Linda didn't become a better mother the day she hired the right specialist. She became one the day she stopped trying to fix what she thought was broken and realized the only thing her son had ever needed was to feel that she wasn't about to leave. That's the quiet truth this story holds. The people we love most don't need us to be perfect. They don't need us to have the answer or the plan or the $400 sound machine. They need us to stay, to be still, to let them come to us in their own time, at their own pace, on their own terms. Love is not a performance. It's not a transaction. It's just showing up and staying there, even when nothing is happening. Especially then. If this story stayed with you, even just a little, drop a comment below. Tell me about someone in your life who taught you what real presence looks like. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and hit the bell. Every video we make is for the person who needed to hear something true today. Thank you for watching. It means more than you know.